In 1985, reggae producer Lloyd James, aka Prince Jammy, released a song by singer Wayne Smith called Under Me Slang Tang. This was a herb tune which was recorded over a basic rhythm track or basic music created with a Casio electric keyboard, drum machine, but no traditional instrumentation, no bass line, etc. This caused what was known as the digital revolution in reggae. Soon it would overtake the entire island for the next several years. All anybody wanted to hear was digitally created reggae. Prince Jammy himself had several completed music tracks laid down by his regular session musicians. He had to stockpile those. Nobody wanted to hear that at the time. All they wanted to hear was what became known as computerized or digital reggae. You can see on the outside of his studio at the time, we specialize in computerized rhythms. Dub cutting, voicing, mixing, Superpower Records. Superpower, also the name of Jammy's sound system, unassailable in the dances at the time. This period, what was known as the Digi-Reggae period, also became known as the Ragamuffin period, or Raga. Ragamuffin was a term for these up-and-coming artists that happened at the right time to coincide with the rise of digital reggae. Ragamuffin might be seen as a derogatory term, much in the way as generations before Rude Boy had. The young up-and-coming artists took it as their own, as a sign of their uniqueness, their aggressiveness, kind of a rebel attitude. Raga would become known as the term for dancehall reggae, kind of like dancehall 2.0. Dancehall as a term, Jamaican music had always been dancehall. This was kind of a retrenching of its roots in the world of sound systems, the clashes between them, who had the more exclusive music, what the public wanted to hear, what they responded to in the dance. This had started to really assert itself control over the music in the late 70s, early 80s, with kind of the very sparse, almost robotic beats of bands like the Roots Radics, which typified the first half of the 1980s, a new crop of artists whose vocals were, they needed to be more flexible to be able to fit their lyrics to any rhythm track that might be dropped in the dance, to respond to how the crowd was reacting. They had to be more versatile, maybe, than traditional singers of generations before had been. And also a new crop of DJs with different styles of delivery as they applied their techniques to the evolving rhythms of the time. So this was what was called digital reggae. And King Jammy's, though he would have to fend off those who would try and take his crown, he would fend them all off and see himself crowned as King Jammy in this time. Now, we're lucky this era of Jamaican music has been chronicled rather well at the time by Canadian Beth Lesser and her husband, Dave Kingston. They were on very good terms with Jammy, were very present at many of the events as they were happening. She's chronicled these in several books through her photos. Dancehall book, The Rise of Jamaican Dancehall Culture, appeared from Soul Jazz several years ago. There's the outside of Jammy's studio with the iconic Jammy's record label. She has also put out a book called King Jammies, again chronicling many of the events as they happened, as Jammy's superpower ruled the island's dance halls. King Jammy himself, the digital revolution would see him explode into a prolific period of production. Once he had his crew in place, Bobby Digital, the late Bobby Digital, soon joined him, became one of his key men at the mixing desk, mixing many of his productions. Soon after Slang Tang, the duo of Steely and Clevie, Wycliffe Steely Johnson and Cleveland Clevie Brown, took those electric keyboards and drum machines they had already been working with, applied their techniques to Jammy's production, and turned into a hit-making powerhouse. Many of their productions appearing for Jammy. Of course, Jammy had to capitalize on that Slang Tang first, put out the album with singer Wayne Smith. Slang Tang appeared on the Green Sleeves label, so later reissue. He also put out a dub version Apologies if I'm repeating some of my previous video. I've been spending some time listening to all these productions again, following on from the recent passing of Bobby Digital, and just discovering how much of this music Bobby Digital was involved with. Computerized dub appeared following up dub versions of the Slang Tang album, but dub as a format, particularly at least on LP, would begin to fall out of favor in this period, as the computerized rhythms were not as suitable to the sort of manipulation of mixing as the traditionally created rhythms had been. Jammy would do quality work in this period, the latter half of the 1980s, with a variety of both new and veteran artists who were able to adapt to the new dominant computer sounds. Of the new artists, a new crop of, again, these very idiosyncratic dance hall vocalists emerged, whose vocals were uniquely suited to these computerized rhythms. One was Nitty Gritty, turbocharged. His album for Jammy includes hits Hoggin' and Minty, turbocharged the title track, Ram Up the Dance. The music becoming very self-referential at this time, almost trying to ward off any notion of international crossover success that had kind of maybe been a hallmark of the 1970s, with major label involvement from Island Records, from Virgin Records. This period was a absolute circling of the wagons around the dance halls, around the culture of reggae and the sound systems, and just no crossover attempts whatsoever. Lots of self-referential songs, lots of soundboy killing tunes made it to record, referencing the sound clashes between different sound systems. Became almost a subgenre of itself as digital reggae took over. Another singer, eccentric singer, King Kong, had many hits for Jammy. His LP Trouble Again, and The World Is Getting Nervous, always timely. Again on the Green Sleeves label, 1986, Mash It Up Already, Move Insane, title track Trouble Again, Legal We Legal. His version of the traditional Emmanuel Road is a favorite. As well, the dancehall singer Frankie Paul cut several major hits for Jammy. Casanova was one and led to an LP of the same name. The classic blue and white Jammies label there from Jamaica. And voiced at Jammy Studio, mixed at Jammy Studio, rhythm tracks created by Jammy, Steely, and Clevey, the dream team in action there. Jammy's productions would appear on various artists' LPs. Here's just a couple I've got. This was actually sent me as a VCLT some years ago, early in my vinyl community days. Echoes versus Rockers FM, kind of a cryptic title. I'm not sure what that refers to, but a mix of various artists on here. Frankie Paul, Delroy Wilson, a veteran from way back in the 60s, the Wailing Souls, as well as a new crop of artists like Admiral Bailey with his hit Big Belly Man. Jammy's a big belly man. Pat Anthony, another up-and-coming dancehall singer, veteran Horace Andy, there's King Kong again, mix of veterans and new artists. Another one, Prince Jammy Presents, using the Jammy Superpower logo. King Kong, you got Dennis Brown and Leroy Sibbles, both legends, as well as Leroy Smart, Nitty Gritty again, another of his hits, Run Down the World. And that one is on Live and Love label, which Jammy's productions appeared on in the US. More veteran artists that benefited from the Jammy's touch at this time. Junior Murvin put out a typically strong album called Apartheid, 1986, produced by Prince Jammy. I think this is partly digital, partly traditionally created. Channel 1, voiced and mixed Jammy Studios, backed by Superpower All-Stars, Steely and Clevey, and the High Times Band, which should be partly traditionally created. Cultural Roots, Running Back to Me, appeared in 1988 on Mango label. Beginning of a resurgence of interest in Jamaican music in the latter half of the 80s by Island Records. We'll hear more about that later. Of the new crop of DJs that made their names performing live on Jammy's sound system, one of his most prolific was Admiral Bailey, here with his hit Jump Up, again on that classic Jammy's label. Another of Admiral Bailey's hits for Jammy was called Punani. Again, the rise of slackness in the dance hall tunes of the time. Punani is a rude word for female anatomy, let's put it that way. Admiral Bailey, Punani, I've only got it on the old Tougher Than Tough box set, but the rhythm track actually completely original, not reversioning a rhythm track from the past, which they would also do, recreating them in the digital style to give dance hall listeners something familiar to recognize, just a new lick of paint. Nothing new in Jamaican music. Everything is recycled, reused, reversioned, reinterpreted. Another eccentric singer Jammy would have a number of hits with was Pinchers, here with Agony, 12-inch single on Jammy's label. We got a year, 1987 on this year. I was graduating from high school that year. Had no idea about Jamaican music. Pinchers put out several albums with Jammies. This one is Got to Be Me. This one includes Agony on the Live and Love label again. Produced and arranged by King Jammy. He's king by now. In 1991, Pinchers would have another big hit with Jammy, Bandolero. Back when I first started collecting records seriously, started hitting the thrift stores, this was one of my first big scores. Same day, I found U-Roy's debut album, Version Galore, as well as a Rocksteady compilation, which did not fit with this album at all. Many years removed, but very good find that day. And that is again on Jammy's. Produced and arranged at King Jammy's. A little bit later here, different crew of musicians, Mafia and Fluxy, Steely and Clevie, the Firehouse Crew. By around 1988, Bobby Digital, as well as Steely and Clevie, had all left to form their own labels, their own production camps. But Jammy's carried on same way, well into the 1990s. The dancehall singer Coco T would have a run of success with Jammy. Don't know if you can see that. That's a tune called Tune In. Coco T would also form a productive relationship with Bobby Digital while we're at Jammy's studio. Here they are here, hard at work in the studio at Jammy's. Bobby Digital right there and Coco T having a good time in the studio there. This is from The Revenge of King Jammy Superpower All-Stars Volume 2, compiling many of Jammy's hits of the period. There's many compilations of his work. This is Volume 1, Revenge of Superpower All-Stars, with the outside of the studio again there. Pressure Sounds Maximum Pressure imprint also put out a nice look at Jammy's later years. King Jammy, the Rhythm King, dancehall classics. There's the king there, Smiling King. This appeared in the early 2000s, 2003. Excellent compilation from Maximum Pressure. The hits would continue for Jammy. Here's that Casanova single by Frankie Paul again, 12-inch single. Another hit with Jammy for Frankie Paul was Sarah, cover of the Starship tune. Engineer Bobby Digital. It's kind of a blank, doesn't have the name or title on there. X Sound System copy I've got. Many hits with many artists, DJs like Admiral Bailey, like Lieutenant Stitchie, like Red Dragon, many others, all bringing a more aggressive style, more gruff style, faster paced chat to keep up with those computerized beats, and the singers as well able to match their vocals to the new style of rhythm. From about the late 1980s on, the singers Brian and Tony Gold were part of Jammy's crew, adding kind of a sweet male duo harmonies to many of his productions. Bullseye, one of their hits for him under their own name. Brian and Tony Gold. Many, many hits from Jammies in these days. Another one from Admiral Bailey, New Brand Slang. Many of these Jammies digital productions are very, very cheap, very affordable. One DJ who would have success later on in the 1990s, Chakademus. He would team up with a singer called Pliers as Chakademus and Pliers. In the early 90s, the two of them would have a massive worldwide hit with Murder, She Wrote, not produced by Jammy. For all its retrenching of the core values of reggae music as being grounded in the dance hall, no concessions to international tastes, Raga, or the new phase of dancehall music, would actually in fact cross over to unprecedented levels of success. Shabba Ranks, another DJ who did some early work at King Jammy's, went on to work with Bobby Digital once he left to form his own label, ended up having a series of albums released by major label, some partly produced by Bobby Digital himself. King Jammy himself, I don't think ever really had a major pop or pop reggae crossover success, but many of his artists and his proteges did, particularly in the early 1990s when he had artists like Shabba Ranks, like Beanie Man, like Bounty Killer, releasing albums of undiluted dancehall, undiluted raga DJing for the mass international market. But those sweet singers would always hit the hardest for King Jammies. One of the ones who had recorded earlier in the pre-digital phase for Jammy and would adapt almost effortlessly to the computerized rhythms was Johnny Osborne, who had voiced Buddy Bye over that Slang Tang rhythm track. As I said, Jammy did have to fend off assaults from other producers trying to steal his thunder, trying to steal his crown. One of the first was his old mentor, King Tubby, who fired back, who had recently refurbished his own studio and fired back with an original computerized rhythm track called Tempo, which was voiced over by a dancehall singer called Anthony Redrose. This is another Pressure Sounds issue featuring Tempo by Anthony Redrose. Absolutely brutal digital track with almost metronomic, almost robotic, monotonous vocals. Jammy would hit back with his own version of that same rhythm track, Tempo, created by King Tubby, would make his own tune on it and fire right back at his old boss, his old mentor, King Tubby, with another cut by Johnny Osborne, No Sound Like We. We're going to leave you with that one. This is Johnny Osborne, No Sound Like We, No Sound Like Jammies. Rhythm track called The Tempo. None of them no sound like Jammies. None of them no sound like we. Couldn't test we. This is a battle tune. We got a fling dub plate and a soundboy fade. Murder. Straight into DJ, Tonto Irie. Version to version. Same rhythm. Lyrics from me mouth is like a bullet from a gun. Battle tunes. Dancehall.
In the east, we eat the cheese and the bun. With the spring, summer, winter, or autumn. Yes, and Dennis Brown, man, him have to run come.
Dennis Brown, have to run come. Johnny Osborne, have to run come. Calling the posse. Peace, final community.